Hey guys, I just finished my first year in the architecture program at the University of Cincinnati. So if you're looking into being an architecture student or you're just interested in the field, here's a quick recap of my first year and some things I wish I knew before I started. Now, the most important part of architecture school that they really don't tell you about is the studio. It's going to be your new home away from home. It's going to be your home away from the dorm. My roommate and I were both in architecture, and there were some nights I didn't see him. It'd be 5 p.m. He's like, I'm going to the stew, and he was there until 5 a.m. Came home to shower. You're going to spend a lot of time there. So, if you're touring colleges, be sure to take a look at what you're getting into. I mean, as a first year, you're not going to get the best studios. They save that for the upperclassmen and especially the grad students. You've got to earn those. So, in our case, our studio was on the top floor of the building. Air conditioning kind of worked sometimes, but it was also just hot as balls, especially when there were all 160 of us in there for class. And the facilities are not often going to be the best. We missed out. They're gonna get new desks for everyone, and we did have to bring our own chairs. I feel like most colleges should probably provide you with a chair, and ours will next year. So we had to buy a chair for ourselves for nothing. But our desks, which are 3-foot desks, which at this point doesn't really matter, but back in the day they wanted tall desks so they can be closer to the light for drafting, and it's just kind of stuck, so you had to get a stool to sit at. The desks were old, and about 60 years of students cutting into them. They were chipped and marked, and all the doors had the graffiti from all the previous students that made it through. It was kind of cute. But just be prepared to spend a lot of your time in the studio, and the people you sit around are going to be your new family. So that first day of class, know what you're getting into. Try and pick someone that you're gonna want to be around for half a year, and also try and pick a seat that doesn't have any pipes directly above it. My girlfriend, her desk had a drainage pipe right above it that leaked every single time it rained. So she had her trash can. Everyone knew it was hers because it was always parked right behind her desk in case it rained. Otherwise, there was just a huge puddle. And then they fixed it right after we left. It was terrible. So just know, when you're going into studio, you're going to be there for the long haul. The people around you, you're going to share blood, sweat, and tears with. So hopefully you get a good crew, because they're going to be your new family. And speaking of the studio, I'm not sure if every school's like this, but we were also required to buy our own supplies, and this included not only just materials for projects, but also the physical tools and stuff you needed to do architectural work. So we'd buy drafting board, T-square, that's a big one, triangles, French curves, compasses, really all sorts of drafting tools. And then also, it came with Bristol, which is your good 14 by 17 paper that you're going to be doing a lot of stuff on if you're doing hand drafting in your school. Came with newsprint, a massive pad of 17 by 22 inch newsprint. I barely made a dent in that. That's probably going to last me for the rest of time. What else? Pens, markers, pencils. Not pencils, lead holders. Fancy pencils. Nice because they're nice and weighty, and obviously you can take the lead out and swap it for different weights. Oh, and the most important part, you're gonna have to buy all this like before you move in, and we had two options. You could buy it like through the school itself, which was more expensive and also a mistake because they didn't have all the materials ready for like the start of class. Like, I bought the stuff and went down to the school bookstore in the basement of the building, and it's like, hey, I'm here to pick up my kit. And it's like, yeah, we're missing this and this and this and this. And it's just like, you know how many people are like coming here to buy this stuff. How do you not have it in stock? This is your one job. Oh well. If you get a second option, there's an art store right next to our campus, and theirs was not only cheaper, but you know, they had all the stuff, and a lot of it was kind of better quality than the actually maybe not. It was about the same. There were some things that were better at the school store and some things that were better at the art store, and if you've got one, you're gonna have to find out, or you know, go through trial and error to figure out like what you should buy where. Like in our case, it was definitely worth it to get any sort of like paper or board material just downstairs. But if you're getting like an actual like art supply, to go to the art store. But with that kit, it was about $50 cheaper, and the only caveat being that you have to lug it about, I don't know, it's about maybe a 10-15 minute walk all the way. It was on, if we were on this part of campus, the art store was here, so you had to carry it from one corner of campus to the other, and it was kind of a walk, but you're gonna be walking everywhere if you've got a nice urban campus, so it's really not the end of the world for $50 and to have all the stuff guaranteed to be there. Now for classes, your class schedule is going to look completely different to all of your friends that are in regular boring ass majors like business and finance and whatever the hell. You're going to have some cool ass classes, but it comes with the caveat of not being able to do like most of your homework at home because you're going to have to do it in studio. It's nice and it sucks because like you've got the community of people around you where you can like collaborate on stuff super easily because you're all in one room, but you gotta get up early on Saturday morning and haul your ass all the way to the stew to like finish parts of a drawing. And like if you've got just a little left and you gotta go in, it can be kind of annoying, but honestly I think it was worth it. And the most important class is going to be some variation of like your design lab. Most people end up just calling it studio class because it's like your creative class where you're given a problem, you got a couple weeks, maybe a month to do it, and you check in with your professor along the way. And the most like interesting part about studio is how grading works, because in this class, like, you don't get a grade for each project. Your professor just kind of like, I don't know, keeps note of how you're doing and how you've improved over the course of the semester, and then you get one letter grade at the end. And it's not like you don't know how you stand in the class. I mean, obviously, like, you're doing critiques throughout the whole thing. If you're doing shoddy work, your professor's going to tell you, and you're going to get the opportunity to improve. Like, not even just on a project-by-project basis, but, like, if you're halfway through and your idea just isn't going anywhere, they're going to tell you, like, this sucks, and, like, yeah, you're going to have to put in a little extra hours to, like, get it to a point where it's salvageable, or just scrap it and start over, which has happened, and, you know, it's not the end of the world. It's better to, like, recognize that an idea is bad than just kind of, like, power your way through it. But like, as long as you're open to like that creative process and you show genuine interest, like you're gonna do fine in the class. Like, it's honestly a huge relief off of your shoulders to not have like the constant pressure of like, oh, what am I gonna get on this project? Oh, I gotta do the best on every single thing along the way. No, you just have to like, they respect your time if you respect like what they're asking of you. So like, as long as you're putting in effort along the way and trying to develop an idea, rather than like you come up with one thing and you technically solved all the problems they asked. It's less of like a traditional high school class where like, here's the right answer, and it's more trying to get you to like problem solve and be able to come up with like a reasoning behind your solution. So I guess to start going through each project, like they don't expect you to be able to design a building or anywhere close to a structure for a semester. We started off with our 100+1 project. So before school started, sent out an email like, hey guys, before you move in, try and collect at least like 100 of like a common household object. So what I did, went to my grandma's house, I got a bunch of her old clothespins, and then the +1 is like one way to stitch it together. So essentially, yeah, the first project was just using a lot of one thing and one consistent way to put it together that couldn't be glue or tape, to create something that like didn't look like the original object that you made it out of, just using like all of these individual units to make a larger whole. It was a really, really like, I don't know, out of the blue project. I struggled with it, but it was like everyone did. It was your first like dipping the toe into the water of like architecture school, and I don't know, I found it really fun looking back on it. Like, that was a great way to start off the semester. So here's where I'll throw up a picture of what I did. I used the clothespins, and then I got some string, and I made this kind of like weird wooden tapestry thingy. And I tried to like have like the lighter clothespins at the top and then slowly get darker as they got to the bottom. It didn't turn out like the best. The clothespins sucked. Like, if I could go back and pick a different material, I would have. But I had a lot of fun doing it. Our next projects were all related. It was the line, plane, and volume cube. And that's really the driving like forces behind these like first semester projects. It's just understanding like the basic generators of like form and space. So we start off with line, which is the most simple and obvious, you know. So we had to go back to the art store and buy a set of like basswood sticks and a miter kit. And so we got like tiny little 1/8-inch ones, and then larger like 1/4-inch sticks, and they were about, I don't know, yay long. And then from that we had to create, starting off at like half scale using the smaller sticks, 4.5-inch by 4.5-inch cubes out of them, except not like literal cubes where you just draw the outside face of every single edge. It was more so like using the lines to like fill that space of a cube without it, you know, literally just being a box. And so I forget the exact rules, but it had to stand on every single side, and you couldn't just have like the bottom and create like some kind of sculpture. It had to be freestanding and without like a main orientation. That was carried through with like all these other projects. Less of like, I don't know, just, you know, doing the simplest thing and using these like lines, or in our next case, planes. And the pictures I have of this are terrible because I only took like one in the back of the hallway and then she broke. But the planes were also, there's a museum board, which is like a real, it's pretty sure what they use on like like the back of a real nice framed image. So it's like a real thick kind of like paper you gotta cut, and this helps it like obviously hold together when you glue it and stand up. But same thing here, like you just kind of have to be able to come up with your own reasoning behind what you did, whether it's like you cut all the pieces to be like following a certain set of proportions. So what I did for mine, since it was a 9-inch cube, divided into 6. So like I made my I made mine 1.5-inch squares, and then like they were all either like square or rectangular, but all the measurements were like multiples of 1.5, which really helped when putting it together. And then I carried that into the final part of this one, which is the volume cube. And this one was a pain in the ass because obviously like gluing 2 sticks together is fine. Well, these ones like had some thickness to them. Obviously, if it was just like paper thin, it would have been impossible. But yeah, moving on to the plain cube, like gluing those they weren't paper thin, but you had to have like a decent amount of surface area to get it to really stick together. Otherwise, you had to kind of make a corner. Then for the volume cube, having to make like a solid box out of the same material as the plain cube, the museum board, was terrible, because like you had to get all of your cuts precise and account for like the width of the board when you were, assembling it. And so just getting it to like end up the way it did was a real headache. And I decided to make it super hard on myself and take like the original idea I had and then put a hole in the middle, so there was this like cavity in it that I had to fill in every single side on the inside. I don't know how I did it, to be completely honest. And then along the way, we also had some 2D like drawing elements, and this was kind of a mix of like teaching how to make like for the line cube like an axonometric drawing, so like representing every single side in with like real dimensions, so you could like easily tell, or not easily tell, but compared to like a perspective, obviously like with a perspective you got vanishing points, and like the further something is in the back, like the more it's distorted compared to its like actual true to life measurements. With like an axon though, it's you've seen probably like some kind of isometric drawing or game, or I'm trying to think of an example. If you've seen Cubert's an example of like an isometric. Cubert's a terrible example. No one knows who Cubert is. I'm leaving that in. Okay, well, Cubert's the only one I can think of, so I'll just throw up a picture of Cubert. But when you're further back from like that front point, everything still stays true to its actual like dimensions. Like you can go up with a ruler or your scale. You gotta be real familiar with your scale. There'll be more on that later. But you can go up and measure it, and you can tell exactly how long it is. It like doesn't get distorted like a perspective drawing would. I didn't have a concluding thought for this drawing, but just know that it's going to be tough the first time you do it, and you'll slowly get better at it. Obviously, like there's ways to digitize all of this, but being able to do it by hand first really helps you like understand what's going on, and not just like, be able to print it but not really like explain why or what it is. And moving on to like our next drawing, I'm trying to think. We use gouache, which sucks balls. It's like this matte. We got black and white. We weren't really allowed to use color for anything first semester, They kind of saved that until second semester, like going really, really bare bones. As few tools as possible for you to mess with. And I guess, yeah, the line of thinking was just like trying to get us to be masters of like the really simple stuff before you go into all the detail of like a more complicated, even just color. Like, you should be able to understand how to create differences with just black and white before you throw color in the mix. And that sort of contrast is a really important element. So I forgot what I was talking about, but I think it was the black and white sort of plane cube painting that we made. And alongside that, we also did another axon plane painting. And I forget. I'm pretty sure our plane cubes were supposed to be based off of another person's painting. We traded those around, and then after we did that, we had to make another painting that like showed in a sort of minimal way like what each face of our plane cube looked like. And then to tie it all off with the volume cube, we had what do you want to call it? We had to combine like elements of line, plane, and volume, and while also showing our volume cube. And so it was just meant to be like a mix of all three as like a cumulative way of like wrapping up those three projects. And then our final project of first semester was the armature, which was like a two-parter. The first part that we had to do was a plaster mold of, it didn't have to be our volume cube, but it was like 6 inches by 6 inches. And you could obviously change it up or stay with like the original design, but we had to create or scale ours down or make it more minimal or just come up with something new. And then create a mold out of foam board that obviously like the negative space of that mold would become your plaster, like where you'd pour the plaster, and that would take on the shape of the cube you wanted. So we had to make our plaster mold, and obviously like if there's any sort of hole or leak or crack, it's gonna leak everywhere, which is what mine did. So I had to start all over from scratch, and I ended up simplifying mine a ton to make it way easier on myself, because I spent a lot of time working on that mold. And then like my first cube was really complicated, and like knowing like what the next project was going to be, I knew I could like subtract some parts from it without I don't know, really detracting from like the main goal that I wanted to achieve. And so just like taking that step right away and simplifying it made it a lot easier for me in the long run, because I ended up getting really sick when I had to redo the mold, and I had like a 2-hour nosebleed in the studio, and so I was really suffering. But like I was able to get it done, and because it was more simplified, like I didn't end up spending too much time on it, and so I could like actually spend time on myself, which is something that you should do. Do not neglect your physical health to get a project done. Like, there are some of my friends that really could have used like an hour of sleep instead of finishing a project, or maybe a full night of sleep. Like, if you know you're not going to get it done, you should at least treat yourself well, because if you're like missing out on a full night of sleep, you're not going to do good work anyways. You should come first, and you'll be able to do your work a lot more efficiently if you're like in a good state yourself. So anyways, my second mold worked, and so once we got that poured, then we had to move on to armature, which was 6 inches by 6 inches by 18 inches. And this thing was meant to like hold the plaster cube in it in some way, while also like having some kind of clear relationship with it. And so we were allowed to use whatever material we wanted. So I ended up getting a 1/2-inch thick plywood. And the rules were that like the armature itself couldn't extend outside of that 6-inch by 6-inch by 18 boundary, but the cube could. And so I offset mine by like 3 inches, so half the cube was sticking out. And it was a real interesting challenge to try and get it to balance while still getting that like nice cantilever. And throw up a picture of my final result here. Voila. Now obviously like every school is going to have different formative exercises to start the first semester, and like, you know, no two are going to be alike. But what you can expect is that nothing you do is going to resemble like what you think of when you think of architecture if you're new to the field. Like, they want you to start from very, very bare bones. Obviously, like, everyone kind of has like preconceived notions of like what looks good and what doesn't in a building, and what they're trying to steer you away from is just being like a decorator and more of a designer. Because like you could make a box and throw on like any certain like architectural style you wanted, but if you didn't really like understand how to make a form, or like if you can't make something interesting without all that kind of decoration, like what you've created with all the decoration isn't going to be as good as what you could have. Like, you get what I'm saying? You smelling what I'm stepping in? Essentially, they want you to just start from a blank slate, and like once you get more comfortable with like the basics, then you can move on to the finer details. It's hard to just start with details and come up with anything that's really coherent. So second semester in studio is definitely a lot more freeing. The projects are definitely not like as constrained as the first semester ones are, and there's not as many of them. So you can obviously spend more time on each and fully develop an idea. The first thing they had us do was create a set of like body proportion and movement diagrams. If you've ever seen Da Vinci's Vitruvian Man, or if you're real fancy and you're real into it, Le Corbusier's Modular, which throw up over here. Both of those are an attempt to understand like the human body's proportions and sort of use that in a way to make like architecture that's like proportioned according to the human body. And so what they had us do was put tape on ourselves and take a bunch of pictures of us both standing still and in movement. And then we had to create 2 sets of drawings. One of us like standing still, and one of us like doing an action. So in my case, it was me going upstairs, and sort of from that we had to like abstract it in a way that I don't know, didn't like it represented the different parts of the body without physically showing, you know, the hand at every single point. What I did was just trace like where my hand went as I went along the path. Oh yeah, our next project was the aggregate unit. So second semester had a lot more group projects. So we were paired up in groups of about 5 or 6. The studio groups are broken up into about 20-ish people per professor, and there's like 160 at the start. And so 8 different professors, 8 different groups. Some of them are going to be worse than others. It's really luck of the draw, but you know, at the end, like, your grade is going to be relatively the same. Well, by the time we get to second semester, there were 18 of us at the start in my studio group, and so we got broken up into 3 groups of 6, and immediately one of my group members left and went home, so we were down to 5. We went through a lot of different iterations at like a super small scale, and then we just like, the way we started, we had to come up with like just a bunch of stuff off the top of our head, and then we were rotated around and given like someone else's little project, and then we had to like create our own version of that in a sense, and we kept doing that over and over, and then at the end we kind of organized all of them, and then we divided them up based on like the types of units that they were. So there were some that were like curvy, and some that were more just like polygonal, and some that were like really planar. And so once we divided them into groups of 3, then we were assigned to our groups. And so my group got all of the kind of bendy ones, and we ended up like going through a bunch of different ideas, and then we came up with like our final, which was like kind of an X, where one face was on the front and then the other was on the back, and you could stack it and it would create kind of like I'll throw up a picture. You can see the pattern, kind of like smaller circles and then bigger oval type shapes. We ended up going down to the wood shop and cutting a bunch of those like little S curves, and it was a really fun team project to like kind of assembly line a bunch of units. We ended up making 12, and I didn't end up keeping any, but it was kind of fun to be able to make a bunch of something and like have like a real life-size project for once. So our final project of second semester was the green roof pavilion. And so in our college building, there's one section that's got like a green roof on top of it. And so our task was to design a sort of pavilion that could be like an extension of the 8th floor, because the green roof is sitting on top of one part that's only the 7th floor. So if you're on the 8th floor, you can stand in like the library and see out onto it. And so our job was to create kind of an extension of that space that would be like sort of outdoor. We weren't allowed to have like an actual like enclosure with walls and windows. And so our task was to create sort of an outdoor space that could extend that for not only like classroom use, but also like just a place to look out onto the campus, and a small hangout spot for like a small group of people. So we had to like combine, a large group, small group, and class setting to create sort of opportunities for all of those sorts of gatherings to happen. And this is a super fun project, and like coming up with a bunch of different solutions to the problem in like teeny scale, and like collaging different ideas together at the start, and then narrowing all that down into one final idea was a super fun process. Without going into too much detail, my project was based on this painting by Piet Mondrian, Broadway Boogie Woogie, and from that I sort of evolved like a network of like curves and lines and sort of like boxy spaces. Alongside our pavilion, we had to create a 1 foot to 1/8 inch scale model of the college itself, and not the entire building, but it was a pretty decent chunk of the college like surrounding the green roof, so we could provide context to like our final model. And this was really challenging to like get completely right. But well, I'm sorry to say, my final model got chewed up by the car as I was bringing it home, so I have to glue it back together. But you can see it in its finished state here, before the car accident, and it was really challenging to like glue all those tiny parts and little sticks together. But I don't know, it was like the first real experience we had creating like a building model, and like this pavilion was like our first foray into creating, actual inhabitable space for once. And being able, like, having all of that experience beforehand of just like, the line plane volume stuff, as boring as it seemed, like, I don't know, it really helped to create, or to, I don't know, it helped to generate ideas without directly thinking like, oh, this is a chair, this is a bench. It was more like, okay, this shape can be a chair, and then it can also be steps. It can be like auditorium style seating. It can be a canopy. It could just be a wall. I don't know. It was definitely like not how I would have, like, if I had to solve the problem, or like if I was given this project before my first semester, like just going in, I think what I would have made wouldn't have been nearly as interesting or compelling as like what I created after, or like having been through all of first semester. And walking around like on that final day of pinup and seeing every single person's like different way of solving like the pavilion problem and like the direction they took it in was absolutely awesome. It's like one of the best, I don't know, I think, yeah, it's the best part of being in like a school with the 150 odd other creative people, is like no one's gonna solve something the same way, and everyone's got a bunch of cool ideas. Even if you don't feel like you're the most creative person going in, like the way you approach a problem is going to be completely different to the way like the people next to you do. And for you, like what may not seem that exciting is like totally different from like the way other people see the problem. And so like everything you make is going to have kind of your own personal touch on it. It feels really fulfilling to like be able to see each person like express themselves in a sense, and it's totally unlike really any other like non-creative major. There's just, I don't know, so much room for expression. It's really freeing. Outside of studio, your other classes are going to be more similar to a typical college class. The ones we had first semester were communication skills, which focuses more on the technical aspects of architecture, and then human dimension of space, which was more of like a theory of architecture class. Starting off with communication skills, this one was largely focused on hand drafting. So we started off real simple, like creating what do you want to call it, orthographic drawings, so showing like the faces of each object, or like an object or a building in like either 1:1 if it's really small, or like scaled detail, and having everything be like true to life in its size. And then we started moving on to first isometric and then perspective drawings. So isometric I talked about a little bit earlier, where we're able to see multiple sides of an object, but everything's still scaled correctly. And then perspective gives like a realistic drawing of like what it would be like to stand in a spot and like see an object or a building. And eventually, like, we started getting into some kind of like mixed media where we drew something and then used Photoshop to like put textures on top of it, which led into second semester communication skills, which I'll talk about more in just a minute. But our other class, Human Dimension of Space, really, really interesting combination of lectures and readings. And I don't know, it was just super cool to get like a I don't know how to describe it, to be honest. I mean, just getting like the theory behind like what architectural elements mean, what's like the significance of, you know, even just a door or a window. It's not something you really think about before coming into architecture school, but it was one of the most interesting classes I had. You know, you just have to experience it for yourself. And you're either going to love it or hate it, but I really hope that if you're really passionate for this stuff, you're going to find a lot of appreciation, or you're going to find a lot of enjoyment in like your theory classes. And then second semester, we had Comm Skills 2, and then History of Architecture, which was really divisive, but it was one of my favorite classes. And then what was the last one? Design Science. And Design Science was the most simple, and to be frank, not the most interesting. But it was largely about like it was largely about materials and like the requirements, like the code requirements for like a door or a ramp or stairs. Kind of tied in with communication skills, but it was just more of like a practical class of like, okay, this is what bricks are good for, and this is what wood is good for. These are the qualities of glass. And well, it wasn't like the most, you know, nail biter, edge of your seat type of class. It was nice to get that kind of like practical knowledge. And communication skills too. We started to move away from like the hand drafting sort of stuff, and so we did kind of a combination of digital drafting in AutoCAD, and then like 3D modeling in Rhino, and like rendering both with like Photoshop, Adobe Illustrator, and again like mixed media stuff, like combining the two, or or like exporting what we had made in AutoCAD and Rhino, and putting it into Photoshop and Illustrator to like, you know, color it, give it texture, shading, and like, or place like a 3D model that we had made into a realistic environment. All of that stuff, which you know, is going to be super handy when you want to document your work in a less technical fashion. I'll throw up some examples again. It was definitely a super valuable class, and kind of bridge the gap between like the just doing like technical construction document, like one-to-one recreations of like what we've made, and kind of moving into that hybrid between like creative expression and like being able to show a client like what the thing you're making is going to look like, what your vision is, how your design process evolves. And then what was the last class? History of Architecture. Started with like the Industrial Revolution and like followed the modern movement up until, you know, the late 2000s. And a lot of people really didn't like it because it was like the most lecture heavy, you know, reading class we had. Lectures twice a week, like additional reading every once every 2 weeks, and we'd have discussion on top of that. But I don't know, as an architecture nerd, which I'm sure if you've made it this far into the video, you probably are too, it was just super interesting to be able to like, you know, go through historical precedents and like understand like the context that they were designing in, and like what drove their like creative process. It was just like, I don't know, eye-opening to be able to see these like old buildings in the light like that. They were being able to see like historical buildings in the context in which like they were designed, and what sort of like environmental what sort of environmental factors like drove the design process, and like what materials were available, like how those influenced the way we design. It was a super interesting class, and I don't know, if you go to lecture and you pay attention, you take notes, like you're gonna do fine. A lot of people overhype like how difficult it is, but as long as you're paying attention and doing what's asked of you, it's really not going to be that bad. So in conclusion, I'd say my first year of architecture school was totally unlike, one, like anything I had previously had before in high school, and two, totally shattered my expectations of what college was going to be like. Just the total like hands-off nature of class, like, you know, made time management a super important skill to have. Like being able to prioritize when you're gonna do your work, like being able to prioritize like when you're gonna do your work, what classes you're gonna do first, and like being able to plot it out ahead of time and like get stuff done early instead of, you know, procrastinating, pushing it all off until the night before and losing sleep over that. It's a really important skill, and it'll help separate like the people that are going to go far from the people that you know, really can't manage in that sort of high stakes environment. And it sucks, but you know, if it's not for you, it's better to drop out when you're like 1 or 2 semesters in compared to like 3 or 4 years and now you don't know if you want to keep going. They really try and like weed out the people who may not have the real passion for it right away, instead of like, you know, having easy classes to start out and like, you know, wasting people's time, which, you know, it sucks. Always sucks if you drop out or have to switch majors, but you know, it's better to do that early than realize it's not for you way further into the process. The studio environment is something that I was super duper grateful for. I mean, like the people there that I met are some of the most awesome, creative, funny people that like I've met in my life, and just having a group of like-minded, you know, people that you're going through the same experiences together. You're all struggling through the new project. Friendships really blossom, and like I think the studio group, or the studio environment is definitely probably I would say it's one of the better like ways to start off your first year, because everyone's in it together. You're all nervous. It's like a trial by fire. You're just trauma bonding with all of the other people that like this is their first time through it too, and you're all on even footing. So it's really easy to, you know, become friends with the people around you. Other than that, I'd say like your college experience is not gonna be like other people's. I mean, like if you've got friends that are, you know, barely have any homework, skipping classes, like going to parties every night, you're not gonna have the time for that, and you know that's something you're just gonna have to accept. Like if you were planning on going to college to, you know, party and not care about school, like this is not the major to do that, and you've got to like make the choice of either, you know, going to college to have fun and enjoy life while you're young, or to like focus on your education first, because it's not like you don't have any time when you're an architecture major, but being able to prioritize what's important is a huge skill. And like people with like the people that aren't spending enough time on what they should and too much time on like the extra stuff are, gonna fall behind. And finally, like, there's a lot of scare tactics of people like saying how stressful it's gonna be, how rough it's gonna be. But it's really only as hard as you're gonna make it. And a lot of people are, rough on themselves. They make projects way harder than they need to be. If you're thorough and you understand things first before flying through a project and you end up doing something wrong, just taking your time and being cautious and just, aiming to understand first will help you immensely in the long run. Really, like, you're only going to have as many all-nighters as you make for yourself. I'm terrible with making models, so I come in early and I put in the hours up front just to, get that out of the way. So I don't have to, like, if I procrastinated, I'd end up staying up all night and working on a model that I'm terrible at. But just being able to prioritize my time and, like, push aside that extra stuff to get what I have to do done first made a world of difference. It really wasn't that stressful most of the time. And I guess, the most important thing is to just have fun with it. It's your first semester. Your professors are going to know that. As long as you, show genuine interest and you have fun in the process of creating, like, you're going to do great. I believe in you, viewer. And with that, signing off with love. Adieu. That was terrible. Signing off platonically. Goodbye.